Nvidia have made a couple of very interesting announcements of late. The first was the nerfing of mining performance on new or upcoming cards, such as the RTX 3060. This is not just a driver lock either, it's also going to be part of the silicon and also the BIOS. Time will tell whether this actually works or not, but they are also bringing other older cards back into the fray too. So for gamers who want a more budget-friendly option, cards such as the GTX 1050 Ti are meant to fill that very need. But there's a question. Is the GTX 1050 Ti even worth considering in 2021? After all, the card was released back in 2016, believe it or not. We're going to be looking at this, the GTX 1050 Ti from Galaxy. It's an EXOC White Edition, which touts itself to be extreme in its overclocking. I have no idea why I did that. Either way, just as a quick disclaimer, this card was actually sent to us by Galaxy, although not recently. This card was actually sent to us when this card was new and shiny. But we've kept it, of course, just for legacy tests, and you never know when things like this could happen. So me of the past, when I thought to myself, well, in 4 or 5 years, I could really use this card maybe. Well, yeah, I was right. Anyway, let's have a look at the specifications of the card as well as the aesthetics, and then we can get into the performance. For specs, we're looking at 768 CUDA cores. Of course, this card is based on the Pascal architecture. And for comparison's sake, the 6GB GTX 1060 sports 1280 CUDA cores. With our sample, we're rated with boost speeds of 1468 MHz, with 4GB of memory, and it's clocked at 7008 MHz, that's GDDR5, with a bus width of 128-bit, so a total of 112GB per second. As I mentioned a moment ago, this card is based on Pascal, so features such as variable rate shading, hardware-based ray tracing, and mesh shaders are not supported. The Galaxy GTX 1050 Ti EXOC has a single DP 1.4 and a HDMI 2.0B port, as well as dual-link DVI. For power, the card demands the sacrifice of a 6-pin PCIe power cable. The card is small, you can see it here against the Founders Edition RTX 3080, as well as a Founders Edition RTX 3060 Ti. The design is largely all white for its shroud and back of the PCB, although there are dashes of colour here or there, such as the copper heat pipe. The two fans are largely silent in gaming, and with a closed case you'll not really hear them. The shroud also doesn't quite extend to the edge of the rear I/O, so warm air can easily flow back into your case, although there's a small area which is cut into the I/O plate to help air escape. The reason the shroud is designed around this is because of the amount of space the DVI as well as other I/O ports take. So airflow would be constricted if it was just from the very small vent. This allows air to easily move without constriction through the fin stack and exit. The card doesn't put out a ton of heat though, so really and truly a case with semi-decent airflow should handle this extra heat without too much trouble. Okay, so we know how the card is spec'd, but what about performance? We're running the latest Nvidia drivers on an Intel 10900K clocked to 5 GHz, and we're going to be focusing our tests at 1080p. Older titles, well, you might get away with 1440p, but just because this card is obviously not just a little bit older, but it was also mid-range when it was released. 1080p is probably going to be about the limit most gamers will want to push this. Not to mention, you will probably start to run out of VRAM anyway at like 1440p. But anyway, let's get on with the results. For performance then, the GTX 1050 Ti performs basically how you would expect from a card which was released back in 2016. Not terribly, but it's also not going to be tearing through the latest titles. Lighter gaming workloads run just fine, so titles such as Shadow of the Tomb Raider, assuming again you're running at 1080p and cranking down the settings a little, will play just fine. Other games, such as the Medium, are an interesting case. When you're in just a single world and you're not in the dual reality kind of rendering, then the game will run amazingly, like over 100 frames a second, again, assuming you're running at the lower quality settings. If, however, you are in an area which does have the dual world, dynamic, then things become a little different, and you can definitely see sub 30 FPS. I haven't really done much investigation here to see what's going on or what the culprit is, but if I had to guess, it could be something to do with ROPS or perhaps bandwidth limitations of the card. But again, that's just a guess, and I haven't really done much experimentation. For overclocking, our sample reached an additional 130 MHz on the core and 610 additional MHz on the RAM, increasing performance in Shadow of the Tomb Raider from 39 FPS to 44 with the medium graphics setting. It's not a huge boost in performance, but it was achieved fairly painlessly, and this card is also unable to access the power limit slider, so we're a bit limited in what we can actually squeeze out of it. So then, should you pick up one of these cards? Is the GTX 1050 Ti actually worth it? Well, it's interesting because of the shortages in hardware at the moment. Despite this card being supposedly for the budget gamers out there, some retailers are quite frankly being, well, on the verge of extortion with it. And I've seen some retailers actually charge almost like $200 for this card, which this card is not worth $200 US. If you can get it for a more modest MSRP, actually close to the MSRP, a more modest price, then it's a bit different. I will also be putting out other videos in the not too distant future, so subscribe of course and comment down below if you'd be interested. But I do know of a couple of other GPUs which are much cheaper than this and could actually serve to offer a similar or perhaps even better performance. So again, stick with us if you'd like that, and we can also start to fill out those charts. This is not a bad card at all. It's a pretty decent GPU for the offering, but it really does depend on the price you can get it at. MSRP at the moment is just all kinds of messed up. With the RTX 3060, for example, the MSRP for that is $330 US, but just because of the shortages, some retailers are charging at least the same amount as the RTX 3060 Ti. Yes, you can't mine on the RTX 3060, at least in the present state. Maybe that will be different in 3-6 months from now, but the reality is the available market for graphics cards at the moment is huge. Even if Nvidia were to release 2, 3, 4 times the amount of GPUs as they normally would for a product launch, it wouldn't matter because the available market at the moment is so huge. You can't mine on it, but gamers just want a graphics card, and I can't blame them. And it's causing some retailers to, let's say, take advantage of the situation. With that said, hopefully you have enjoyed the video, and if you did, then of course you know what to do. If you already have been subscribed to the channel, thank you very much for sticking with us, and I'll see you soon. Take care of yourselves. Bye for now.